If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Alex Soojung-Kim Pang, and Alex is a futurist, a technologist, and an author of several best-selling books, which includes Shorter, Work Better, Smarter, and Less. Here's how. Alex is also the program director at 4-Day Week Global, where he continues to study the global movement to adopt a 4-day work week and change the way we all work around the world. Alex, thank you for joining. I'm really looking forward to getting your insight and perspectives today on this topic. So Alex, would you mind telling our audience what a 4-day work week is and what it isn't?
The kind of 4-day work week that we're interested in is one in which companies are reducing the number of hours that people work per week without cutting salaries or cutting expectations around sort of productivity or output. There are places that work 4-day weeks where you move to 10-hour days, but that's not something that sort of we have been sort of pushing for, and companies honestly can generally figure out how to do that for themselves.
So when a company goes to a 4-day work week, are there challenges that HR teams find themselves getting involved with? You know, is it impacting recruitment? Is it impacting retention? What are the other challenges that might come up in this space?
Lots of companies actually will try a 4-day week to solve problems with recruitment and retention, right? They often will tell stories about losing some key members of their executive team or developers or salespeople and realizing that they need to make a dramatic change in order to attract and to hold on to great people. I think that for HR professionals, what this means is that they report spending less time on, having to deal with putting out job ads and doing onboarding and that sort of functional stuff. On the other hand, I think in order to make a 4-day week a success, they do have to spend more time thinking through the implications of a 4-day week for policy and operational things, right? How you calculate PTO or what you do with vacation days, what you need to do if you want to make this permanent and renegotiate people's contracts. The other thing I think that's important is supporting executives in moving from a kind of transactional sort of management style where you're mainly kind of watching the system to something more transformational. Because when you move to a 4-day week, you got to change an awful lot of stuff. And the people who are going to be doing those changes mainly are workers and teams themselves. That requires creating a kind of space for them to try lots of new things, to experiment, sometimes to fail, and then to learn quickly. And I think that one important thing that HR folks can do is help advise executives about what's required in order to create and maintain that sort of space.
So, once an organization goes to a 4-day work week, are there anticipated issues that can arise that you can warn HR professionals about? I mean, does it impact recruitment? Is it impacting retention? What are some of the common things that you kind of give HR professionals heads up about?
So lots of places will implement a 4-day week partly to deal with issues around recruitment or retention. And what we see is substantial improvements in both of those. In some very dramatic cases, you have turnover rates going from over 100% a year among sort of nurses in a nursing home that did this, for example, to something like 20% a year. There are also systemic savings in terms of just less time that you have to spend dealing with interviewing people, with all of the stuff associated with recruitment and hiring and onboarding, which leaves you more time for things like professional development. I think on the sort of other side of the coin, that it does put on HR professionals sort of the burden of thinking through the implications for a whole bunch of different kinds of policies, right?
Yeah.
Everything from how you deal with PTO and vacation days to potentially, if you make this permanent and you have to renegotiate everyone's contracts, then sort of you have to think through 1,001 things there. And then I think also that on a kind of day-to-day basis, that helping leadership understand what they need to do in order to make a 4-day week succeed for everybody. First and most important is they have to practice what they preach. Right? An organization in which leadership is not themselves doing a 4-day week senses a little bit. I see a shift from sort of transformational style of leadership as opposed to transactional, that an awful lot of doing a 4-day week is not outsiders or managers figuring out a bunch of new processes and then telling everyone how to do it, but rather creating a kind of environment in which people and teams can work together to figure out how to redesign their work days, to tighten up processes, etc. And I think that that's a different kind of challenge, I think, for some kinds of leaders, and one that I think, that is absolutely essential that they meet, but which they can't necessarily do by themselves. And so I think that sort of having help with that is also, is the other really important thing for sort of making this succeed.
Yep, great. So I know you recently completed a study that involved 60 companies in the UK that were testing out or trying a trial program of the 4-day work week. What kind of insights did you gather that might help the rest of us understand, pros and cons of that? So
this was a study done by our colleagues at Boston College. So it was a team of sociologists who were working entirely independently of 4-day week global. So they, and what those surveys revealed was that there are overall pretty substantial improvements in things like work-life balance, decreases in work-family sort of conflict. There are, within companies themselves, people tend to report feeling happier, feeling less stressed, which is which is all very often a concern, given that you're trying to get people to do 5 days worth of work in 4. And so they always worry, I have trouble getting everything done now in 5 days. This is just going to make me more stressed. The evidence is that that if done right, you can avoid that. People also report feeling like the work itself or their jobs are more meaningful, which is a really important thing if you want high quality people and you don't want them to to burn out, and you want them to be good at their jobs for a long time. There are between no and very modest impacts generally on revenues or company profitability. And companies generally spend next to nothing on implementation of these programs. People are not having to move into new offices or get new IT infrastructure. It's about using existing tools more intelligently and thoughtfully. And then I think that the couple other things that jumped out for me is that percentage of sick days dropped, I want to say, by about 2/3.
Wow.
And people are sleeping roughly, I want to say, half an hour more per night on average, which is, you can, and the fact that both of those things are happening is not a particular, those maybe maybe not a big surprise, but they're both things that I think sort of speak to the potential sort of long-term benefits of implementing a shorter work week sort of for your company and your employees.
Yeah. So I know in the research you did for Shorter, and as you looked at, I think it was well over 100 companies around the world, were there certain characteristics that stood out on companies that were doing it right? Were there certain traits of a company that you could identify?
Early on, it tended to be smaller companies with the original sort of founders or founding team still in place. I think partly because they had sort of the both kind of skin in the game and the moral authority to say we're going to try something different. And these often were people who themselves had been working, flat out for 10 or 15 years. And so they wanted the 4-day week for themselves just as much as they wanted it for everybody else. I think that, almost all the places that I have studied or worked with are ones that already exhibit a pretty high degree of interest in or care for their employees, right? They want to be seen as an employer of choice. They already have other kinds of programs, and they see the 4-day week as a build on them, or as a way of kind of bringing together a whole bunch of different efforts in professional development and work-life balance and personal support. And that means that there have not, on the other hand, been companies for whom this was, who are doing it entirely for productivity gains and without really interest in their people. The final thing I'll say is that the range of companies doing it is growing, so that it's not just small companies with the original founding team in place now. We're seeing many larger companies getting looking at it or implementing shorter weeks themselves. So, it kind of now starts at the head of people and culture level, or, chief HR officer level, who has to explain, kind of sell it both downwards to the workforce, but also maybe sell it to the CEO or to the board. The companies are getting bigger, but they're all places, I think, that already take a serious interest in their people and don't just pay lip service to that idea, but really want to put it into practice.
Yeah. What are the signs that a concept like a 4-day work week might not be a good fit for an organization? Are there any things that jump out at you?
I think that there are certainly places with more complex logistics, or places in which you have very little control over your time or workflow. These are ones where you have to think harder about whether implementing a 4-day week is going to be practical. So, we've worked with a couple law firms, and ones that are doing corporate law, I think, have an easier time making it work than ones that are doing public advocacy and spending a lot of time with court appearances, which just happen when the judge says, and you just got to work with that. I think also that if you are, ironically, a company that already works really well, if people are happy, you've got let's say, low turnover levels, then it can be harder to make the case for a 4-day week, especially if it's going to involve a really serious redesign of, let's say, the way in which hourly workers operate. Yeah. And then I think finally that we have not seen many places yet that have union representation involved, but at least in the United States. On the other hand, in Iceland, unions were the big driver for the move to a shorter week in the public sector. I think that this is more a function of the kinds of businesses that have been early adopters, rather than a kind of inherent difficulty of making it work when employees already have representation.
Yeah. In Shorter, you discuss how leadership is often the driver to making this change. But so if you're an HR professional in an organization where leadership is really ignoring it or not interested in it, what can you suggest to these HR leaders? How can they influence their leadership to make a change here? What data, what information can they go to?
Couple of things. First of all, we've got a ton of both company level studies and now the bigger surveys, not just 4-day week global, but the Icelandic government itself has been studying the 4-day week and surveying places where it's worked since 2015. So they've got a pretty good data set as well. So you have this kind of high level data over the course of years, looking at the impact on businesses, on people, on family life, et cetera. I think it's also the case that even if you don't have a company that is, let's say, exactly like yours or in precisely your same industry, that there are lots of companies that altogether have solved the different challenges that you might face. Companies that have 24/7 customer service. They might not be in your industry, but they figured out how to keep sort of the kind of customer success teams sort of going in a shorter work week. Likewise, there's sort of professional services that are still doing billable hours and companies that have operating in multiple time zones. If you want to make the case, you can say, there are the big challenges that we can anticipate sort of having are ones that have been solved in these other companies, and here are the benefits. The other thing I would say is that this isn't just about numbers, right? It's also when executives tell stories about moving to a 4-day week, they have a team of people who are working with them. They have sort of, a sense that this can be an important legacy for them. And I think that sort of making clear that, this can't happen without without the CEO, but that if they are willing to take it on, that there is a team of people who are ready to work with them to figure out these problems and figure out how to solve them. I think that also sends an important message that even if you start out very skeptical, that this is something that can work in your industry, and we have the people and the motivation in place to make it work in this company.
Yeah. So a company makes that move. We get leadership supporting the 4-day work week. We get HR on board. What type of KPI should an organization consider in the first 90, 120 days of this program? How do they know this is on track to be a success?
I think that the answer is twofold. One is, don't try and come up with cool new KPIs or measures that nobody's used before, because people know how to assess their performance relative to familiar metrics. Even if they're ones that everyone knows don't capture everything or have some sort of flaw, if you have experience, you can account for those. So at the level of the people involved in the trial, use the same measures that you've used to figure out success working 5 days. On top of that, if you are doing this, let's say in one department of a much bigger company, you probably also want to do a little bit of other measurement to make sure, to be able to answer the criticism. Well, it was, that department could do it, but our needs are different, our rhythms are different. So how do I know that it'll work here? You can think in advance about what kind of data you're going to need in order to make this scalable, to make the lessons transferable. And whether that is, a combination, let's say, of weekly pulse surveys and maybe some other information about different schedules that people have experimented with. Maybe it's some other, watching some other financials a little bit more closely. Figuring that out at the outset, I think, is really important, not just for increasing the odds that the trial will succeed, but that the trial is taken seriously and that everyone learns enough from it to be able to make a choice about whether it can scale. But I think if you have that conversation, before or of early on, then you can figure out, the kind of minimum package of data that you need to gather to sort of, answer everyone's questions at the next CEO or board meeting where you talk about the results and make a decision about what to do going forward.
So, Alex, where's the best place our audience can go to keep track of you and see what's evolving in this area?
So 4dayweek.com is 4-Day Week Global's website. And we publish a number of white papers and sort of studies. And then for a deeper dive, I did that Andrew Barnes' book, The 4-Day Week. Andrew was CEO of Perpetual Guardian and one of the co-founders of 4-Day Week Global. That's a great deep dive into the experience of his company and how the 4-Day Week played out in a whole bunch of different parts of it. And then my book, Shorter, looks across 100 firms. So it's a sort of wide view that complements Andrew's really detailed case study that looks at how, lots of different companies have solved the various problems that you encounter moving to a 4-day week, and talks more broadly about the benefits.
Yeah. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Your insights, perspective, certainly going to be the topic in many coffee rooms around America, because I think we all are kind of figuring out, how do we move to a 4-day work week? It's an interesting topic. And so thank you so much for joining. For our audience, please tune in next week when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion with Dr. Valerie Edmonds. And it goes without saying, let's get America back to work, because dreams only work if we do.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.